But first, to indigenous education. And the government has committed to more than $500 million over the next decade to funding education for indigenous children in the Northern Territory. Joining me now is the school's Education Minister, Peter Garrett. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thanks, David.
Is this money only guaranteed under a Labor government?
Well, I haven't heard what Mr Abbott's got to say about this, but what is clear is that we are absolutely serious about providing the level of support which we think kids in the Northern Territory need in schools. 200 extra positions that we're providing for teachers and teachers' aides, 100 houses, a continuation of the really important school nutrition program, because we know that the gap between the performance of Aboriginal students and others is still too great, and we're determined to close it.
Probably the biggest problem when it comes to schools in the Northern Territory for Indigenous kids is attendance. They often just don't show up, particularly in secondary schools. What are you doing and what's in this funding model to address that?
Well, we are continuing a measure called the School Enrolment and Attendance Measure, but we've expanded it and we've also, I think, improved in as much as we're wanting the school community and the parents to agree an attendance plan, look and see whether there are any obstacles to that attendance plan being fulfilled, provide assistance if we need to the parents to make sure they can get the kid to school. If we don't get the attendance that we think is important, then of course there can be suspension of some welfare payments. But that will happen in very small instances. And I think the important thing is that we're getting a focus on parents to say, getting your kid to school is their passport out of poverty, and we want you to do it.
Where's the evidence that withholding welfare does get more kids back in school?
Look, the trial of this measure in its first iteration showed that many parents, once they received notification that there was the potential for this to happen, actually took remedial action and got their kids back into the school system.
So you believe it is a system that's working?
Yeah, I think
the threat you're saying seems to be working more than the actual withholding.
Well, it can work in that way because it's a way of sending a strong message to a small number of families that ultimately, if you don't make sure that your kids are getting off to school in the morning, then this may be one of the consequences. But before then, there are plenty of opportunities for you to take steps that get him or her there.
You mentioned that it's going to fund 200 positions for teachers in particularly the remote areas. These positions are notoriously hard to fill. Would you consider upping wages or improving conditions for teachers to try to attract them to those positions?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I think the thing that we need to do is make sure that teachers are well prepared before they end up teaching in a remote community a long way from perhaps where they came from. We've actually got special measures in place to encourage and support those teachers when they go out. And we're doing that in consultation with Aboriginal educators. And we've also got training requirements now for teachers when they do their pre-service training, so they have some familiarity and understanding of Indigenous culture, so they don't arrive, as it were, blind to the kind of challenges that they face.
That does happen, though, doesn't it? A lot of the teachers that go to these remote areas are just out of university, pretty green, and get a bit of a shock, and as do the students when they arrive there. That does happen, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, it does. And I think the measures that we have already underway and additional measures that we've announced today will go a long way towards dealing with that kind of, whoops, hang on, how am I going to make the best of this? Look, we know that there are young teachers that do want to go out and make a contribution to Aboriginal education. I think that's fantastic. But we want to make sure that they're well prepared when they do that. The other thing is that we now know much more what can and does work for a young Aboriginal student. There has to be specific focus on their learning. A personalised learning plan needs to be in place that they carry with them when they're in school. We need to have a strong connection between their community and the school. We need to have clarity and leadership from the school community, and we need the commitment from the kids themselves. Now, one of the best things I ever do in this place, mate, is when we have Year 12 Indigenous graduates coming here into the Parliament as they get their high school certificate or equivalent, and they tell me that they're going off to uni or they're going off to do a trade or they're going off to work in business. We just need more of those kids to be coming through to provide the role models for those who are sitting in school and wondering, why should I do this? But also to show Aboriginal people that they've got every good capacity to achieve as well as anybody else. they can fulfil their dreams, look after their families, but they do need this support in the meantime to make sure that happens.
More broadly on education, the Gonski review recommended $5 billion be pumped into the system. It doesn't look like in this budget there's going to be any new money for that particular funding. Why not?
Well, Mr Gonski said that that was his estimate based on the work that his review panel had done. And he also said more work needed to be done. We're doing that work now. I'll be sitting down with my state education counterparts this Thursday in a ministerial council. We've already established a series of working groups to look at all the loadings that Mr Gonski identified, which might be added to a schooling resource standard. And look, we want to do things the right way around. This is a very big, important and serious bit of reform. Education sits right in the middle of our country's prospects. We want to get it right.
The states have had a chance to look at the model that he came up with, that $5 billion figure from. Do you expect that they'll be asking for more money when you meet with them later this week?
Oh, well, look, I'll wait and see what happens when we get into the meeting, David. I mean, I know that there'll be a call on funds, but remember, this government has nearly doubled the funding over 4 years compared to the Coalition. We've spent $30 billion more in education than the Coalition did. We've got reform happening in education, the likes which we've not seen in this country, whether it's the national curriculum, My School website, the national partnerships on low SES communities. I mean, we are doing a lot. BER, fantastic. Improved facilities in every school. So, there's no question about the convictions that we have on education, nor about our track record in funding, but we must get the model right, and we want to do that in a way which makes sure that when we fund education in this country, it's fair, it's effective, it's understandable, and it deals with some of the education declines that Mr Gonski referred to in his report.
The government seems to be losing the battle on who's best to handle the economy. What are you going to do to turn that around?
Well, I think that our track record on the economy is outstanding, and I'm not just saying that. That's the view of people from overseas who look at Australia and say not only is Wayne Swan doing a great job, but the Australian economy itself, compared to other equivalent economies, is healthy, robust and resilient. Now, yes, there are economic challenges there, but we've met them successfully as a government. So, to answer your question, I ask people to focus on what we've done, look at the tough challenges we've got in the budget, but recognise that our relatively low interest rates, our relatively low unemployment, our extremely low in comparison net debt to GDP ratios are the envy of the world.
So is communication the problem, as Chris Bowen suggested?
Well, look, I didn't hear all of Chris's comments. I mean, I'm happy to communicate that I think that we have managed the economy well, and I think that the runs are on the board there. It's not without its challenges, and clearly with the minerals boom in full swing, there is a two-speed economy, and there are adjustment difficulties. We understand that very well, but at the end of the day, if you're looking at how the economy has been managed through the budgets that Wayne Swan has brought down and how Australia sits in compared to equivalent countries in the world, we're doing pretty well.
Peter Garrett, thanks for your time.
Thanks, David.